Hi, we are here at George Cates's house in Laku Hutong, Beijing. I'm here with my good friend Bill Yin, who is a journalist here in China, and he is helping record this video. This is the entrance to what is now number 16 Laku Hutong. When George Cates lived here, the setup was a little bit different. This actually wasn't part of his house. The properties were divided differently. The entrance to his property was actually Cates's book, The Years That Were Fat, and it's a book that was written in 1952. It describes his experiences in Beijing from 1933 to 1941, and in the book he basically describes his life in the city, and he gives a lot of information about what the city was like at that time. So part of what he describes would be, I suppose you would call information for a tourist. He talks about the temples, the Forbidden City, the palaces, that type of information that anyone coming to visit the city would be interested in. But he also gives a lot of information about the culture, the habits and I guess the way of life here for Chinese people, as well as some information about what it was like for expats who were living in the city. He talks a lot about the customs and the arts of traditional China. So it's a combination really of his experiences living in Beijing, and also basically what Beijing in that period of time was like. Okay, we're about to go into George Cates's house, and as we go through I will describe some of the features and how things have changed in the last 80 years since Cates lived here. So here we go, we're going through the front gate of number 16 Laku Hutong. You can see here some of the original features. I think the lintel and actually roof tiles are original from that period, but there's been a lot of changes. The door itself is different, but this is a new sign, relatively new, and once you can see here, this is an original lintel here, or a series of lintels. As we get into the actual courtyard, you can see that it's completely different now. A lot of structures have been built out, particularly in the last 20 years, and these are obviously not original to this Chinese house. This area that you're seeing would have originally been an open courtyard, and now it is quite cluttered with various buildings. As we move a little further in, this is actually this property was a small courtyard in the 1930s. It was actually separate from George Cates's house. You can see that it's November here, so there's some wind and colour in the trees. As we move through here, this is actually the north end of George Cates's house. The property to this side was originally the house belonging to the eunuch. This house, it's been, you can see the wall is new, it's been rebuilt, but this is actually George Cates's main house at the back, the north end of his property. And you can see the electrical units, which are meters for all the different residents. So these meters basically, I assume there'd be 1 meter for every resident. That's how many people live just in this main courtyard in 2014. obviously in the 1930s it was the property of the residence of a single person, and he had 3 courtyards, not just this one. There you'll find it. So this is we're looking now. Originally this would have been a big open courtyard, but now it's just a narrow corridor. And what you're seeing is the front of George Cates's main house. It's been essentially rebuilt over the years, but they tried to keep some of the traditional features. The portion here that's sticking out is a kitchen. Originally the property had a kitchen at the front, in the front courtyard, but now that many different people live here, each person has their own small kitchen. 你好。你好。I don't think any of this is original. It's just in the. This is the main house behind me in the original style. The side houses were, I think this was the one in which Cates had his bedroom, which is facing us to the right there. This area you're now seeing would have been courtyard, and then to the right was his guest house. There was another bedroom in there where guests could stay. And at the far end of this courtyard there was a gate, but obviously you can't see that now. In a little while we'll go to the front portion of his property, and you can see something about how the front 2 courtyards now appear. But this property, which is attached to number 16, is essentially the main courtyard of his original house. Okay, we're looking now south down La Cou Hutong, and the buildings to the left here are what was originally the eunuch's house during the time that George Cates was living in Beijing. It's all changed now. They're all multi-family housing units, but there were 2 small courtyards as he describes in his book. But you can see now from the electrical boxes there are many residents. Originally just the eunuch and his wife lived here. So you can see there's 1 courtyard over here, and then there's 1 courtyard over there. And just as in Cates's time, when there were rickshaws here, there are still people taking rickshaw tours. And you can see they're not exactly rickshaws, but the bicycles that people tour around the hutongs in today. So now we're at like a junction, a turn in La Cou Hutong, and as we turn here there's the back of another building, and this here along the front is this would be the south end of the eunuch's house, and over here in the corner is somewhere in here was the entrance to George Cates's house, and the big tree that he describes in his book. I can't quite figure out where the gate was. It's probably behind this, where this motorcycle is. That was probably the gate, but it's also possible that it was in this corner. I'm not clear about that. Obviously it's all been changed. But this is the way that it looks today. And if we go a little further and you look down the street, you can see the rest of La Cou Hutong, and some more folks getting a tour of the hutongs. Ni hao. And this is looking south down towards the centre of historic Beijing. Okay, so now we're going to go into what is now number 22 La Cour, but was originally somewhere here was the entrance to George Case's house in the 1930s, and this was what we're going to go into was the first of his three courtyards. You can see here there's still a big tree. It's a different tree. It's not the same tree that he had. I don't believe it's even the same type of tree, but you can get some idea. But instead of an open courtyard, again there is a lot of material that has accumulated. Here you can see the number of residents. This gives you an idea of the number of residents who live here today, as opposed to in the past when it was a single family residence. So this, where we are standing right now, would have been the first courtyard of the three, the southernmost, and it was big enough to. This is where people left their rickshaws when they came to visit. And in this courtyard somewhere there was a kitchen. From the historical maps, there's a map from 1750. There was actually a structure on this end of the courtyard, of the first courtyard, which I think might have been the kitchen. The reason that they would have had the kitchen in the first courtyard is the risk of fire. They wouldn't want the main house to be burned down by a fire coming from the kitchen. So if you kept the two separate, then it provided some safety. So I think that the kitchen was at this end of the first courtyard, and there would have been some sort of a wall and gate here, somewhere in this area, that would have led into a smaller second courtyard. So this is somewhere in here what would have been the second courtyard, and this is where Case's servants lived. So there was a wall, there was a screen wall between the first and second courtyards. There was also a courtyard, a wall and a gate leading into the final courtyard. So you can't really get a sense of what it was like. This would have been an open area with just buildings at the sides, and somewhere just in here there would have been the gate into George Case's main courtyard, but now it's actually a house with some kind of kitchen on the outside. Okay, we are now at the front again of George Case's house, the southern part of the three courtyards. One thing that hasn't changed a lot in the last 80 years, or actually in the last several hundred years, is the layout of the hutong. As with many hutongs, for whatever reason, the actual layout of the streets hasn't changed very much. And if you look at the Qianlong map from 1750, you will see that La Cour Hutong looks very similar. So even though the structures along the street have changed, the actual layout of the street itself, the property lines have not changed. And for some reason this section of the street of the Hutong was wider and the other parts narrower, and I don't know why that was. But it has some historical significance that's long since been lost. And I've been researching his life for the last several years, and I've written a biography of him, which is going to be released in the new year. It covers his whole life, but it focuses on China and his experiences in Beijing, and there's a lot of good information, a lot of good original information that I've been able to locate to make that possible. But yes, it was wonderful to find this house. I don't know how much longer it will be here. Beijing changes so much. A lot of old houses are demolished. So we'll see if, I hope it continues to stay here. It's changed very much, but you still get some of the feel of what it was like to be here in the 1930s, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. Hopefully it'll give you a sense of what it's like.